Welcome to the Reciprocity with AG podcast, hosted by Andrew Gadomski. Here, we explore ideas and experiences that transform lives with elegance and integrity. Andrew spent over 15 years as a workforce analyst for Fortune 500 companies in finance, healthcare, and supply chain sectors. In 2022, he took on the coveted role of Senior Operations Research Analyst at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, committed to enhancing cybersecurity and AI skills for the American people, its residents, and tribal nations. Andrew founded Aspen Analytics, a firm that leads in compliance and ethical challenges in our AI-driven era. Their Canopy platform turns risk into action, offering real-time policy solutions across wage and human capital disclosures, algorithmic and AI decisions, and cyber risk to HR departments.
Welcome to the Reciprocity podcast with AG. I am AG, and I'm pleased to have Stephen O'Donnell, longtime colleague and member of the recruitment community at large and a leader globally in this space. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Very much an honor to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Stephen, before we get into the questions, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Just give us that elevator story.
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, I've been involved in the recruitment industry since 1987, which would make coming on for 38 years. Initially as a recruitment consultant, then owning recruitment agencies in Glasgow and working in the manufacturing sector. But since 2000, I've been in the technology sector, initially with a website called alljobsuk.com. I also launched the National Online Recruitment Awards in the UK in 2000, and which is now in its 25th year. And through the awards, we, on behalf of candidates, recognise excellence in online recruitment from job boards, employers, recruitment agencies and technology firms. Very much embedded in the recruitment sector for all these years. A lot of that time with technology companies, and just now with TA Tech, where I'm the Chief Growth Officer. TA Tech is a membership organisation for technology companies and job boards in the recruitment space worldwide.
Appreciate that introduction, Stephen, and I think that 30 years is really why I've got you on the podcast. It's one of those types of careers where you've seen everything mature over that period of time. So let's get into this and start going through our questions. I'm really excited about today's pod.
We all have different business experiences and we have to make investments and then yield the consequences. What would be something you would offer to another person about avoiding a poor business investment or a costly business expense?
Yeah. So costly to me would come under the broader range of investments, but it's to do with partnerships and people that you're in business with. I don't want it to sound like being upset after the fact when I didn't come out well in something, but in the 90s, I was a shareholder, a partner in a recruitment firm, a staffing firm in Glasgow. Started as two guys in a room. We had no turnover and built it in the space of 6 years from zero to about £12 million in turnover. We were recruiting permanent placements for mostly technology employers. At one point, we had around 2,000 factory workers assembling PCs for IBM. You should have seen the Excel spreadsheet for the payroll. This was before we had any more advanced technology, because we literally started with a payroll with 20 people, 50 people, 70 people, and built from there. The clients that we brought in were all in the PC industry, making injection moldings or the metal casings for the PCs or assembling them and so on. I was a minority shareholder in this business, and I found that the other director in the company, my partner, had a plan to move all of the assets of our company to a separate company that he owned completely, which I obviously didn't have a stake in. Quick visit to my lawyer, and then we set off to the High Court to get injunctions to stop that from happening. There was a serious falling out, but what I realized was that when you're a minority shareholder, you have very few rights to plot the path. It dragged on and it really wore on me. It was really frustrating. We had one of those meetings at the company accountants where I came along with my single lawyer and single accountant, and on the other side of the table were lined up 20 lawyers and accountants for him. I know now that they do that as a show of strength so that you feel
Sure, lots of people in the room, more than you, more brains.
Yeah, absolutely. I was beaten down by that, and I accepted a tiny settlement for my share in the business. I learned that 51% is worth considerably more than 49% of a company. I also learned that you don't have to accept something that's in front of you. You could just put it to one side and go and do your thing, and they'll eventually step up their offer. But I accepted it and moved on to other things, thinking I did it with this company, I can do it again. Not fully realizing that sometimes you're very fortunate in setting up a business and the clients that you get and the growth that you have, extraordinary as it was, is not likely to happen again. And of course, time moves on. So the company that I set up afterwards did not grow nearly as fast. And I, like a fool, spent quite a bit of the money that I got in settlement setting up the new company with all of the bells and whistles, thinking that I would skip those early years of being lean and only spending what we had and playing very close to the vest. What I should have done was set that money aside and start from scratch as if I had no money again. It was an expensive lesson to learn, and the money was spent very quickly, but still a valuable lesson because it informs everything that I do after that. But if I could go back in time and undo that or play that out differently, I certainly would.
Yeah, I think about some of the things that I've made expensive mistakes on, and I've got my share. There's the expense associated with money, but then there's the expense associated with emotion. Sometimes I've made emotional decisions in business that created negative emotions later. All the best intentions, and you're very excited, and then you realize you've created stressors, anxiety, depression, anger, or disappointment that you never had expected when you had that elation. And I find that can be an expensive proposition in itself when it comes to business.
I'm not really someone who gets stressed. And it's not that I'm able to push away stress. If there's something coming up that's stressful, then I'll just opt out. I'll just step away. In that situation, accepting the situation as it was at that time, I couldn't take the pressure anymore and play that kind of long game to get the best deal possible. And I suppose that was me saying, look, move on, do what you need to do and keep your head straight.
So I had this last season's, but I think it's a good one. I'd like you to talk a little bit about food that you've received where you've appreciated that so much that you felt love from that person, or food that you've created or bought and given to someone else, and then they have expressed love from you, or you yourself have felt love in giving it to them.
It's an interesting topic. I don't really cook. I have a policy that I won't cook anything that takes longer to prepare than it does to eat. That's not to say that I won't eat something that someone else has taken a long time to prepare. I'm quite happy to eat, love really nice food. My wife is Italian, so we eat a lot of Italian at home. On special occasions or on request, if she's in the mood and I'm asking, she'll make melanzane. Melanzane is the Italian word for eggplant. She'll peel the eggplant, slice it, roll it and fry the slices. It's very similar to lasagna, but instead of pasta sheets, it's fried eggplant in flour. And done just right, it's absolute perfection. When I have food like that, it takes me back to a happy place. I remember my brothers-in-law, Mario and Joe, had a hotel in Tuscany, and we would go there twice a year. Mario was a fantastic chef, but Joe was the expert in making melanzane, and his melanzane was just phenomenal. It would stop you in your tracks. When my wife makes melanzane, it's to the same standard. And it takes me back because they had a palazzo on a hilltop overlooking the Tiber Valley. You would wake up in the morning, throw open the shutters, and you were above the clouds. And it was just perfection. If I have a plate of melanzane now and it's done just right, it takes me right back to there. The people who have taken the time and the effort and the love to make a meal that will be consumed in far shorter time than it took to make, you can't help but taste that.
That reminds me of my grandmother. My paternal grandmother was the youngest of 7, and they had settled in Chicago on the South Side.
Yeah.
And she and her sister used to make what was commonly known as just macaroni. They shared that recipe together and would feed their family. It was the fact that it was a memory that they were serving.
Yeah.
Right? It really wasn't just the food. It was this idea of this is something that others have created for us and we're creating it for you. I think it's fascinating how when you ask a question like that, the origins of the answer can be very different, but at the same time, they can very much be the same.
So I'm not a foodie. I like nice food, but I will happily have baked beans and toast. To me, that's the lunch of kings, and I would have that every day. I'm just as happy with that as a nice steak. That might sound terrible to some people, but in terms of memories of food, the circumstance is more important than the food. A Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, or going out for a special meal at a restaurant. The people who are there and the circumstance is what makes it much more than the food. The food is nice and the food is the device that gets you there. The same way as when you're playing a game around a table with the family. The game's not important. What's important is that got everyone sitting around the table doing something with each other as a shared activity.
The next one is about meeting membership. There are times where you're in the position of being a leader or even a team member, and you want to include others. And it's not about recruiting others necessarily, but you're sitting around a table and you're recognizing that other members may not be getting heard or given the opportunity to speak. What advice would you offer to others to execute meeting membership better?
Sorry, when you say meeting membership, people are coming together for a meeting and someone not feeling left out, that they don't have anything to contribute.
Oh, they're not offered the ability to contribute. They're in the meeting. It's supposed to be collaborative, but they're not collaborating. Is this something that you've tried to assist with and you recognize that they're being dismissed?
Years ago, I used to manage bands. I was a terrible drummer, such that the only way I could hang around with musicians was if I managed the band. You would often find within the band, there would be 1 or 2 people who were running the show and the other people were tagging along. I always thought that was a real shame. They were just as important as part of the overall team because it's the team that makes the overall sound. And even if their part of that is relatively small in the mix. So they need to be included. Going back to business, when I had a recruitment company, I did a thing with staff members, particularly with new staff members. Every Wednesday at the end of the day, we would have a training session. It might be someone who's experienced in recruitment, training others on how to win certain types of business or what they did in certain circumstances. But with new staff members, I would like them to take the session and train the others on something they knew how to do that the other staff members didn't. It might be something they did as a hobby. It might be they were great at knitting or art or playing guitar or any number of other things. The purpose of that was to show the other experienced members of the team that this person has value, that they have expertise in something everyone else doesn't. And it gives them kudos. It gives them their own space, if you like, to occupy as part of the team. So they can hold their head up and say, I know how to do that thing. And the other people would say, could you come to my desk and show me in more detail, how do I do it, that they can learn from? So it might be the most junior member who has just graduated from university, but has invaluable information on, it might be a new piece of technology. They know more than other people.
That taps into this idea of allowing for respect to flourish. I think it's hard to do if you're a new leader or manager. You're so focused on getting things right, and I have to follow the rules associated with performance plans and make sure people do their individual development plans rather than thinking about, okay, well, what does this individual want to do to develop? Or what can I do to help them to perform? Or how do I get them to stand up? It's that separation between a good leader and one who's just learning how to be a leader.
When I had a
Yep.
business where we were selling psychometric assessments, we often found in someone's profile, and not for a minute would I say that profiles are 100% accurate in every case, but you always learn about someone. And more importantly, people learn more about themselves than they realized. You would often find that someone was undernourished by their work. They might be an accountant and it's a relatively straightforward, maybe even dull job, but this person has a creative aspect to them. And if they could have an element in their job that tapped into the creativity, then they would feel nourished by the job. They would tolerate the dull parts because the creative parts were great. So if your accountant had that element to their profile and you gave them some involvement in marketing or graphics or working with the salespeople, then they would have an outlet that made them feel more used in the company in a good way, more fully utilized. And they were looking forward to a Monday morning rather than dreading it.
I've tried to get people to understand the concept of the smartest person in the room. And you should strive to be in rooms where you tend not to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're brought into that room because you're the expert. But if you're always in the room and you perceive yourself as the smartest person in the room, you've probably created an environment for yourself that may not be very healthy or healthy for those around you.
Like this podcast and its transparency? Then you will love Aspen Analytics. Their audit documentation enable employers to share with investors, analysts, and regulators how their chosen HR practices using AI, wage equity, and analysis reduces significant business risks. Remove these risks before they become real problems. Find out more at www.aspenanalytics.io.
So you mentioned band, and this is another one from last season.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to create your own music band, what type of music would you play? Who would you want as the type of audience? And what's your band name?
Oh, band name, first of all. One of the first experiences of working together with other people that a lot of folk have is they're 14 or 15, they're starting to play guitar or drums or whatever. Even before they learn to play, they talk about, so what's the band going to be called? What are we going to call ourselves? And it's a whole branding exercise because you're thinking about what will work with us now as a band that can't play and what will work for us when we're on TV and selling gazillions of albums. It's a very bizarre exercise to go through, but regardless of what name you come up with, it's always useful because you find out more about what you want and what everyone else wants in the band. I was in a band one time called Zincala and the Riders of the Night, another band called the Suicide Rabbits, a band that I managed who we managed to get signed to Chrysalis Records was called the Wild Rubber Apples. The names, they might bring something to mind when people hear the name, but the name's almost irrelevant because the name becomes the band, a band like U2. Who could have imagined that U2 became this kind of band when they started it in the first place? But they become their name, they grow into their name. Yeah, I do find band names fascinating. Best one I ever was involved with was, they're a band that's still going now, a Blues Brothers tribute band. It's a 9-piece band with a horn section, and they play all the Blues Brothers hits, and they're called Big Vern and the Shooters. In Scotland, they're very well known for playing big charity gigs. If you have Big Vern on your charity gig, you'll sell tickets. These guys have been doing this for 30 years now. That's their social life. They love being part of the band. Over the years, some members have left, some have come in, some have died. So it's a real mix. The singer for most of that time was a doctor. There are policemen, accountants, and property agents in the band. It's a real mishmash. But when they're playing, they're all on equal terms.
So what's your band name? If you were to create a band, what's yours?
My band name, I'm going to go with the Suicide Rabbits.
Okay.
It's off the wall. It's a bit silly. And I think that gives you the opening to become any kind of band. In terms of music that I can play, I'd be the drummer, of course. I still have a kit in the attic. I go up and annoy the neighbours on a regular basis, banging the drums in my attic. All my kids play guitar and bass, and they're very talented. But I would never get into their band because every birthday and Christmas, they say, Dad, what do you want for a present? What would you like for birthday or Christmas? And I say, I want us all to go up in the attic. We've got all the guitars and amps and drums and keyboards. let's just go and jam. Will they play with me? Not once, not ever. I've spent a fortune over the years buying these instruments and paying for music lessons. They just won't do it. They've never been in a band with each other, but they're all really talented and much better than me. So I'm looking for them to just humor their old man and play some classic AC/DC.
There you go, a little Back in Black, if you would. We're going to go back to some of the questions. Tell me about the first job you had, or what you consider to be your first job, the lesson you took from it that you still use today.
Okay, so I'm going to set aside being a paper boy. I had 3 jobs before I started in recruitment. The first one was selling advertising in the local police in-house magazine, the Strathclyde Police in Scotland. I'd be telesales all day selling advertising. It was my first job in sales, and I found that I could persuade people. After that, I had a job selling fax machines before fax machines caught on. The act of selling to businesses, going around offices and trying to give a demo of this product and convince them to buy it when they had no one else they could send a fax to, was a real eye-opener. And from there, I went to sell cable TV to people in their homes. The cable company was cabling up new homes, and we'd be knocking on the doors. Clyde Cablevision was the name of the company, aiming to hit sales targets, traipsing through the snow in the winter to knock on these doors and going in to sell inside people's homes. It took a certain kind of bravery, but you were speaking with people directly. It was business to consumer. When I went into recruitment, I was in telesales. I was interviewing and speaking with Joe Public, who came in to register with the agency. They were all salespeople themselves, or engineers was the niche that I was in. I'd be calling companies to try and persuade them to use our staffing firm to recruit for them. That was at a time where most of the calls I gave to companies, I had to explain what a staffing firm was. They had never paid a fee to hire someone before. Each of those jobs had elements that were absolutely vital to working in recruitment.
And I had a similar set of experiences, oddly enough. I'll probably share one of the first jobs that I've had in each one of these episodes during the season. Somehow I found myself in the position of filling out an application for one of the large credit card companies here in the States. It was a telesales job, and you'd walk in and there'd be 200 cubicles, and they would give you a script. We were calling individuals at home and offering them applications for a credit card. I didn't understand until later how you might be honing in on individuals who needed credit because they were near bankruptcy or so on. And we were using all kinds of lists. And that was the kind of job where they were actually counting how many people you were calling an hour. So it was a computerized system. As soon as you would hang up the phone, they were making sure that you were hitting the next one. I remember using that skill early on in recruitment, where the managing director I started working with just gave me a directory. He says, I want you to call every single person in this directory and see if you can get them on the phone and ask them these 4 questions.
Yeah.
I remember being in one of the customers under Aspen, and I'm walking around a floor, and they have 300 different recruiters. They have 300 recruiters, and there's about 100 here. And then they had them scattered throughout. And I couldn't hear anything. And when I say I couldn't hear anything, it's because people were just using their keyboards.
Of course.
And so I said to the leadership, how come no one's talking to anybody? And they said they're talking to all kinds of people. Like, they're messaging them, they're emailing them, but they're not talking to them. I thought that was fascinating, being someone who would talk to a random stranger about, how's your credit? How much money do you make? Let's see how much of a credit line you can have. I thought that was fascinating, that I was walking in this large organization and they had no one talking to anybody about their careers.
In the earliest days of telesales, you would develop an antenna for buying signals. For me, I wasn't trained in the first couple of jobs that I had. I wouldn't know formally what this was, but I would pick up on, this person's a little bit interested, or I've struck a nerve with something that I've said, and you would hone in on that and make the sale. And each call became a kind of a contest as to who was going to win the conversation.
That's right.
And in those days, you had to come off the call with a result, because it had a direct effect on how much money you took home at the end of the week. This is 40 years, roughly, to the month, I would, in some downtime in a telesales job, I would randomly call people in New York from my office in Glasgow. And I would just pick a random number, the New York code, so 001212, then 7 random numbers. And I would call people, and the first thing I'd say is, "Hi, my name's Stephen. I'm calling from Glasgow. I'm in my office, and I'm a bit bored, so I thought I'd give you a call. How are you doing?" And most people would hang up, but I was just killing time. I have a friend to this day, a fellow called Philip Hoffman. He's an actor, not that Philip Hoffman. Philip Seymour Hoffman died a few years ago, but my friend, seasoned actor on Broadway, you'll see him in lots of shows. We struck up a friendship, and over the years, I would call him. He would post me updates on how he was doing, what shows he was in, how his family were, and so on. And I've been to see him a few times now. Whenever I'm in New York, I'll go and see him. That was from canvassing for friends 40 years ago. It just shows what can come out of random sales call.
I remember one of the first executive searches that I did was for, and it's been such a long time, I can be very specific, was for the vice president of manufacturing for part of the Diageo organization. I'm trying to get a hold of somebody. I ended up finding a gentleman, and he was a great candidate. And he ended up getting, not that job, but another job, but not in that organization, another organization that I hooked him up with maybe 2 years later. And oddly enough, having a event in Las Vegas, you have all these people come to dinner, and he ended up being one of the vice presidents of operations of a large scale winery and liquor company. And I called him after many years, and I said, "Can you get some promotions for me?" And he was more than eager and happy to send things out and make it very easy. And I thought that was a testament to how you can quickly get a relationship, but as long as you keep it casual over years, you never know what could happen over time.
What was on the wall when you were growing up as a child? Maybe it was artwork or something hanging in near where you slept, or something that you remember from being in school. What were some of those visuals and influences that you remember?
Okay. Band posters. I had an enormous ELO poster on the wall. You know that one with the spaceship coming down?
Electric Light Orchestra?
Yeah. I had a huge ELO poster on the wall. But at school, I was really good at engineering drawing, technical drawing. So I had graphics on the wall that I'd drawn of these sort of 3D shapes that I've drawn on the wall. And the meticulous detail that was in those things was really quite something, including the AC/DC logo. I had more than that going on from posters. I had an army surplus jacket that I used to wear as a kid. And I had various band patches sewn onto the back of it. And this came from being in the Scouts, where you would sew on your badges. But on the shoulders of this army surplus jacket, I had embroidered in gold thread the AC/DC logo, and the detail was really something. My mum, when she had her friends round for coffees, she would call me down. She said, "Stephen, bring down your jacket." And she would show off my embroidery work to her friends. Yeah. Mostly heavy rock bands.
I would like to talk about management and supervision for a few minutes. I'm curious if you could talk about a person that you've worked with or has been a supervisor to you, and talk about something that you would want to share with others, or you would encourage others should emulate that practice that you observed.
I haven't had a proper job since 1993. I've been self-employed since then. And I've always either been the boss or sat beside the boss. One confession is I've never been promoted, because from the age of 27, I was management. In terms of people that are inspiring, there are people that I know now who are very good friends, who I think are phenomenal bosses. There's a really good friend of mine, Wendy McDougall. She runs a recruitment software company called Firefish Software, based in Glasgow. And in terms of inspirational, I can see what she's doing, but I'm not sure how she's doing it, because she is absolutely relentless. She is entirely on message the whole time and fully authentic. She had a staffing firm, created her own recruitment software, sold the staffing firm and spun out the software company and has built that up. But during the pandemic, that was a time when leaders were shown to the world. The tide went down and you could see who was able to stand on their own and who couldn't. Wendy was quite phenomenal. She took the bull by the horns and was very visible. She was making videos every day. There was a CEO's video diary of what she was doing, sending people home, making an environment at home with all the equipment and tools to do the job, making sure they were kept up to speed on everything in the organization, and learning from mistakes as she went along. The clarity of message and the approachability that she showed to her staff was really quite something to behold. The buck really did stop with her. If anything went wrong, it was her fault. If anything went well, it was to the credit of the team. She really came out of that dark period on top. The business did exceptionally well on account of that.
What a great soundbite that is. The idea that accountability when things go bad to as the leader, and then when it's going swimmingly, that is the team that's executing. That is an excellent asset within a leader because they're recognizing that they're leading.
Yeah.
Which is different than managing.
I would confess to not being a great boss or leader in that regard as well, because I find it really difficult to delegate. It's difficult to take the time out to train someone to do the job to the standard I would want it done. I get too frustrated and I say, well, I'll do it myself, when you really should take the time to invest in people so that they become independent and can make things happen. Yeah, I really admire people who set themselves apart as leaders, not just managers.
If you were not permitted to use your phone for 30 days, what would you substitute it with?
My phone gets very well used. I have spent the money for the top of the range because I think I get my money's worth. And I use my phone for so many things. If all of those things couldn't be done, if I couldn't have phone calls, text, social media, and setting aside that I don't have easy access to a computer, then what would I substitute it with? I would hope that I'd be able to use my landline. So I'm hoping that a landline is still available to me on in this imaginary world with no phone. I'm hoping that I can still send email with some sort of computer. I mentioned before that I had various jobs in sales. One of those jobs was selling fax machines. This would be 1985, 86. I'd have a little portable fax machine under my arm and I'd go around businesses in Glasgow trying to persuade them of the benefits. They always marveled at how the paper somehow went through the phone line, that they could send anything to anywhere. But the biggest problem in selling a fax machine was that no one else had a fax machine, so they couldn't send a fax to anyone. The first sale that I had, I sold 3 machines to a manufacturing company who had 3 factories and they were going to fax each other, but they had no notion that they were ever going to fax anyone else. And lawyers and accountants would say to me, that's really impressive, but what can be so urgent that a first-class post won't be fast enough? Jump forward to these days and we're expecting absolute immediacy. Fax machines were fantastic. The only thing is, if no one else has a fax machine, how am I going to get the message to them? So I would be pretty stuck.
All right, we're now going into the infamous lightning round. These are really questions that no one has even seen or would never expect on a show like this, and they're binary. So this or that, or maybe yes or no. Valentine's Day, flowers or chocolates?
Flowers.
Museum or aquarium?
Museum, always.
Chocolate caramels or chocolate pretzels?
Chocolate caramels.
Red or black licorice?
Red for me.
Rather go to the pool or the beach?
Oh, I can't swim. I have a burst ear, so it has to be the beach, but I don't like walking on sand.
Would you hike or bike?
Bike, and I'm gonna tell you more than just one answer. Just last weekend, I accidentally cycled to Edinburgh from Glasgow. I hadn't intended to, but I got halfway and was feeling good. But by the time I got to Edinburgh, I really regretted it because it was dark, my phone had run out of battery, and I was really tired. It was too far. It was maybe about 70 miles all told that I did, and I hadn't intended it. I do cycling more than hiking, but I quite like a hike as well.
Is it okay to go on your speaker on your phone in public? Yes or no?
No, never.
Never. Would you like a cocktail, wine, or sparkling water? Pick one.
Wine.
Let's do some word associations.
Disney.
Goofy.
Race.
Car.
Boat.
Sink.
Journey.
End.
Shoes. Stephen, I appreciate you coming on the Reciprocity with AG. How can people find you? Outside of LinkedIn, is there a way that people can get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is the best way, but the tatech.org website is where you can find almost everything that I do, or the norauk.com website for the online recruitment awards.
Thanks for listening to the Reciprocity with AG podcast. You can enjoy more episodes by favoriting the podcast at leading podcast platforms. On behalf of Andrew Gadomski and all our guests, we enjoyed the time spent with you and ask you to consider reciprocating powerful learnings to and from all you meet.